Last edited September 23rd, 2012. Those are the words that appear at the top of the second oldest Google document in my Google Drive. Fun fact, that was about 5 months after Google Drive was initially released, and I'm a little heartbroken that I don't have an earlier random test document where I just say wrote test in a document or something like that to show for my early adopter status. The file in question is in good company. The other files from that era is a backup of a NetHack game that I was playing at the time and an idea for a startup company that never became anything. I'll probably do a whole separate video on that business idea at some point in the future. But today we're going to talk about DIQ, also known as, I believe, Drink IQ. It's a concept that I came up with a couple of colleagues that I was working with at the time and bears absolutely no relationship to the website by the same name that I found. This was something that only existed in our heads back in 2012 for a couple of months while we were musing about it. It was your run-of-the-mill startup idea. I imagine being able to start my own company, leave behind working for the man, and kidnap a few of my favorite colleagues to work with me on a wildly successful app/website idea. I vividly remember wanting it to be an app, in large part because I had just gotten a new toy, Google's Galaxy Nexus, which ironically I still have here, despite it being a 9-plus-year-old phone. I was so excited about getting the latest and greatest Android phone and wanted an app to call my own. There's a whole nother video to be made about the fact that I apparently hoard old tech that no longer works, as well as super old drive files for business ideas that will never come to fruition. But that's not today's video. The concept was simple. We wanted to create a database of information about drinks. Initially, we wanted to just start out with beer, and we wanted to do it via crowdsourcing. So we wanted the information in our database to be largely composed of information added by our users. So in the simple case, you can imagine a user drinks a new beer that they've never drank before, they pull out their phone and they rate it on a hoppiness, yeastiness, mouthfeeliness type of spectrum, and then also note any additional flavors that they might have encountered, like citrus notes or fresh cut grass. This idea of crowdsourcing information about the world at large wasn't a new one, but we had a bit of an ambitious twist that I still think about today and still kind of has me musing a little bit about the concept. You see, the information that we were collecting about the yeastiness, the hoppiness, the bitterness of a particular beer wasn't designed to give us information about the beer at all. The reason for that is simple. Information about beer isn't particularly interesting. I don't need someone to tell me how hoppy a beer is. There's a scale for that that is determined by the brewing process and the ingredients that go into the beer, and that determines the beer's IBUs, or International Bitterness Units. And fun fact about International Bitterness Units, or IBUs, is that they exist on a scale from 0 to infinity, which was a bit of a head scratcher for me, but apparently there is no upper bound on how bitter something can be. And it immediately makes me wonder if there is a lethal bitterness value. Apparently some beers in the world top 1,000 bitterness units, and apparently those are still drinkable. But what about 10,000 or a million bitterness units? Is there a point where you just implode in on yourself and that's the end of you? Hard to say, really. So this begs the question, why have people enter a bunch of information about beer that you already know as ground truth because the nature of beer is kind of a known quantity? And what it ultimately goes back to is if you know that a beer is, let's say, 42 IBUs and an ABV of 5.3, and then someone tells you that that beer was incredibly bitter and had a light-bodied mouthfeel, then you've learned nothing about the beer, but an incredible amount about the palate of the person that's doing the rating. And this was the twist that I still think about from time to time. It's that the data that was being collected was to model the nature of the people entering the data instead of being about modeling the world that they were perceiving. And if done correctly, that model of a person could be used to predict how they would respond to beers that they had never drank. If we knew that they had a very low tolerance for bitterness, then we could recommend non-bitter beers or beers in an appropriately bitterness range for them in order to give them the best beer drinking experience. Today, it seems like a rather boring twist. Everyone and their mother has a recommendation engine that says, because you liked X, Y, and Z, you'll probably also enjoy A, B, and C. But at the time, it wasn't being done nearly to the same degree. 2012 was not nearly as saturated with personalized recommendations as 2021 certainly is. But looking at the competition today, the other recommendation engines that exist out there in the world, it also seems clear to me that DIQ was probably an idea that would have been destined to failure because the amount of information that we wanted to collect, the number of sliders and text entries and tags that we wanted people to be generating was well beyond what anyone collects today. It seems that most services today struggle to get users to click a thumbs up or a thumbs down button on any particular piece of media, and any stronger signal is very, very hard to come by. And strangely enough, the most novel part of this particular idea probably wasn't that it would have worked, but instead that it is strangely the plot of some sci-fi shows that we see today. I won't mention anything specific for spoiler reasons, but the idea of the data that we think you are collecting is not the data that you are actually collecting in a sort of nefarious way is a common trope in the sort of techno-dystopian genre. But thinking about this business idea still tickles my fancy sometimes. I liked the core concept and the way that I laid it out, and so I thought I'd take a second to share it with you. It's kind of humorous, but the only documentation that I can find on it in any of my records today is a one slider that was literally one of the first times that I used slides in Google Drive that was the database model for what I imagined this particular concept would look like. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this because it was a fun trip down memory lane for me, and I hope it was also somewhat interesting to you. For now, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye. Not apotamus. Ponderous.